So we are in Luke chapter 22, starting at verse 31. We are, if you stop and think about what we had now 3 months ago, the triumphal entry on, you would say, last Sunday. That whole week is called the Passion Week. And here we are in real life, about 3 months later, but we're still in that week. And now, on what we've discussed this week and last week with the Passover and the Lord's Supper, the last couple of weeks, that's all on the night in which he was betrayed. And now, what Luke does is he and I told you that chronological order isn't Luke's thing. He's not real interested that at 9 o'clock this happened, at 10 o'clock this happened, and 11 o'clock this happened. So what we are at in verses 24 through 38 is the time that they had entered in. Jesus was washing their feet there, and we had that whole discussion on who was the greater among them. And so Jesus addressed that, and he said, I'm the one serving you, so who's the greatest? And that was an eye-opener for them. In that, John, not Luke, gives us the whole discussion Peter had with Jesus. Hey, you going to wash my feet? Yeah. Well, don't just wash my feet, wash my whole body. Wash my head too. I can only imagine Jesus. Anyway, that's me. So we don't stop there. We have the promise that he gave to everybody in verse 30, verse 29 and 30. And just as my Father has granted me a kingdom, I grant you that you may eat and drink at my table in my kingdom, and you will sit on thrones judging the 12 tribes of Israel. So that was an amazing promise of a future for those guys. Now, at one point in the dinner, and when was it? There's no way of knowing. And not, at least not that I can figure out. Maybe somebody else can. But we get to this little vignette in verses 31 through 34. Jesus says, Simon, Simon, behold, Satan has demanded permission to sift you like wheat, but I have prayed for you, that your faith may not fail. And you, when once you have turned again, strengthen your brothers. And he said to him, Lord, with you I am ready to go both to prison and to death. And Jesus said, I tell you, Peter, the cock will not crow today until you have denied me 3 times that you know me. So we begin with some very simple things. For example, Simon, Simon. You notice that Jesus doesn't say Peter, Peter. When he says Simon, Simon, or Martha, Martha, there is an emphasis. And I don't know if we do that. Maybe you do that in your home, but for the most part, none of us say wife, wife, or husband, husband, or daughter, daughter. We don't do that. If we want their attention, pretty much there's a tone of voice that we give. But Jesus didn't do that, and we had more than one. We did have Martha, Martha. We did have Jerusalem, Jerusalem. So Jesus, there's within him something in which the tone of voice, the repetition, you would be there. But he uses Simon, not Peter, because guess what? This whole thing, in a sense, would be a farce if Jesus emphasized the word rock, which is what Peter is. So he doesn't. Calls him by his regular name. He says, look, or behold, or lo. It's that one word, idu, in the Greek, which calls for something to look at, call your attention to. So, have I got your attention? Simon, Simon, behold. Okay, so what's he going to say? He says this, and we don't, I don't want to say succumbed to it, but in the Greek there's a definite article before the word Satan. But we don't read it as the Satan. But in the Old Testament, the name Satan means adversary. And in the Old Testament, there's always the definite article, the adversary. Now, Jesus is really the adversary. Now, we have no problem transliterating that into the Satan or just shortening it to Satan. But stop and think about, it's not just the booger man, it's the name that is the concept that is behind the name. The adversary. So who's he the adversary to? The whole world. We've already seen him out in the desert with Jesus in the temptation. The adversary did what? The adversary has demanded. It's not a request. Excuse me, God, could you please send Peter here so I can beat him up? Okay? No, that's not Satan's modus operandi. Satan shows up and says, that idiot you have called Simon, I want him. I want him. But there's something we miss in the English here. This is a plural. Satan demanded to have you all. Now he's addressing Peter, but who's around watching? You think all the rest of the guys, once their feet were washed, just went and stood in the corner and said, nice decorations here. No, they were watching everybody else. They were watching the master. So when Peter is there, Jesus is addressing Peter. They all know that what the adversary is talking about involves them all. The adversary has demanded to sift you as the wheat, to sift you all as the wheat. Now, I don't do a lot of cooking. That's for the most part where I think people do sifting. I know construction probably has sifting with sifting out bigger particles from smaller particles so they can either use the big or use the small. Sifting is universal for what? Separating either the good from the bad or the useful from the useless. And it's hard to know exactly what Satan meant when he said, when he demanded before the throne of God to sift the boys, to separate them, to discombobulate them, to use a very modern word, as wheat. We would sift flour, and we understand that. Satan demanded to sift humans, not physically, so we can only imagine this is their character, this is their person, this is who they are, with God, with one another. Now stop and think about Satan coming before God and demanding to sift them all. Satan got one. We already discussed him. He's already had his happy time figuring out what he's going to do with his filthy lucre, 30 pieces of silver. So Satan's already won on one. He wants the rest. So Jesus has a response, and we do not want to miss this. Because the emphasis here, again, we reread it, but I have prayed for you. The emphasis in the Greek is that the ego, the I, the me, is at the beginning. It's placed forward for you and I to notice that I myself have been made to beg concerning you. And prayer, yes, but there's more than one word for prayer. There's the prayers we have when we ask the blessing on the food. There's the prayers we have when someone's sick. There's the prayers of praise and so on and so forth. Well, this one has more the connection with supplicating, which you take that far enough and you could make it beg. And you stop and think about the prayers of Jesus on our behalf. Can you picture him begging God on your behalf? Because I'm sure he does. Especially when you're being productive for Jesus and Satan looks and smirks and, I'm going to go to God. Hey God, can I have that fool? I mean, he's already a jerk, you know that, but can I sift him? Huh? Can I? Thankfully, we have an advocate with the Father, Christ Jesus, our Lord. And he judicially prays on our behalf. And we're grateful for that. So, Jesus has a response to the adversary coming and demanding action against here, the disciples, us. But Jesus says, I myself, on your behalf, have begged. Now this is something that you have read, because we already read it, in order that thy faith fail not. That your faith may not fail. Okay? Now, some of you have taken a basketball and you said, I'm going to make a three-pointer, and you realize that it just got to the free throw line. So you move up to the free throw line and you said, I'm going to make a free throw. And so you toss it up and you fail to make it. Is that what we're talking about here? Or are we talking about where you have struck gold or silver, and so there's this gold or silver streak in the rocks? And then literally what? The streak fails. What happens? It comes to an end. You keep digging, you dig all around, you dig circles, and there's no more. Why? Because it has petered out. Literally come to an end. So look at what Jesus says. I myself, I in my part, have been made to beg concerning you, now alone. Now he's back to just Peter. He told everybody else what was going on with the adversary and the demand, but now he's back to the guy he just addressed as Simon, Simon. In order that your faith may not come to an end. Now here's what's sad. We all know people whose faith has come to an end. And you shake your head and you say, but we went to Sunday school together, but we went to youth group together, but we went even to Bible school together. And what happened? Their faith somehow petered out, and you look all around for something, for faith to continue, and they don't have any. They deny all the miracles and all the answered prayers and all the sermons that they ever heard, and you shake your head and say, how is that even possible? Well, I don't want to repreach the sermon, but there is something about seed. Seed on rocks, seed in the weeds, seed that's immediately disappeared by the ravens. It's only the seeds that's planted that continues to grow down and solid. No matter what happens up here, the faith is firm. And that's what Jesus said. He said, I want your faith to continue. I prayed that your faith would not come to an end. Just to say this before we move on, every one of us takes a free throw and misses. We just get the ball and try again. So, Jesus says, but I myself have been made to beg concerning you, Peter, in order that your faith might not come to an end. And, I love it, and you, Peter, when having turned back. So Jesus is looking back, or looking forward, at the Peter's attempt, with his suit on and a ball in his hand and looking around at everybody. I'm going to make a free throw. I'm not even going to look at the basket. I am so good at this. That when having turned back from what? From missing the basket. Of course, we know what that's going to be. And when you, having turned back, you make firm, you render steadfast, you settle your brothers. What is Jesus looking at? This is Friday, it's Thursday after sunset, so in essence it's Friday. So on Friday, what's going to happen? Jesus is going to be publicly humiliated and murdered. And what's the boys going to do? They're going to run away. Peter's going to run away. They're all going to run away. Why? Because everything has come to an end. It's all been for nothing. Jesus is dead. We've been for 3 years following him, and this is what it's come to. And so they're going to go sit in the corner and suck their thumbs. Jesus is giving Peter something to look forward to. When you have turned back, firm up your brothers. That gives me chills. All of you have shown up. You had some kind of week. You had your failures. You kept trying to make not even a free throw. You just tried to make a layup. You stood right there by the basket and you couldn't get a ball in once. I'm not even a Christian. I must not be, because all I do is fail. It's all I do. I don't even know why I'm called a Christian. What does Jesus do? Because what's going to happen here in just a moment when I finally quit talking about this and move on to what Jesus is going to tell him. When Peter has finished his stupidity and his short-sightedness and his cowardice and his failure, Jesus looks beyond that to his success. When you have turned back, strengthen your brothers. And why Peter? Why not Bartholomew? Because Peter is a leader. We know that. And it's not that the others aren't leaders, but there's leaders and there's leaders. My brother was number 2 man in the mission. He was a leader of men. People just would naturally gravitate to my brother. He was a man's man. I, on the other hand, would be standing next to him. I was always in my brother's shadow. Always. But I'm okay with that. So, verse 32 is all about Jesus ministering to Peter before Peter even knows that he shouldn't be opening his mouth. But he does in verse 33. Peter said, "Lord!" I love it. I have this great relationship with you, and I appreciate you. You're my Lord. Thank you so much. With you, I myself, and there's an emphasis there, Jesus, I was made to beg on your behalf. Peter says, I love it. With you, I myself am ready. I'm prepared. I'm good to go to even into prison, even into death. My name is Peter, Jesus. I'm good to go. Jesus, I know we're the week before Christmas, and I know next week we're going to be talking about the babe, but you got to see the man he grew up into. He's not the little helpless baby. Verse 34. But Jesus said, I say to you. Now remember, when Jesus says, I say to you, I mean, it has the impact of a behold, if we want to get even more personal, a slap in the face. Hey, did you get it? I say to you, Peter. He just told him what's going to happen in verse 32, but now he's going to be very specific. But he gives him his given name by Jesus, Peter, Rock. Okay, Rock, a rooster will not crow today until 3 times me you will deny. Now get this last word, to know, is a perfect tense. Three times you will deny to know me or that you ever did. There's an impact there. It's a 2x4. And Peter should have woken up. Interestingly enough, if you think that Jesus said this only once, he didn't. He said it in the upper room, and then he repeated it as they crossed the Kidron Valley and headed toward the garden. Can you imagine? Twice reiterated that you're going to fail, and you're sitting there, I'm Peter. I can make a free throw from 40 feet, 50 feet, 100 feet. I'll go to prison. I'll go to death for you. Well, we know what's going to happen. We move on to the second part of the sermon, which is 35 through 38. And there's some interesting things here. Believe me, when you go to a commentary, and then you go to a second, you go to a third, and you go to a fourth, you'll probably have 4 different opinions. So I'm just telling you in advance. And he said to them, now, we're done with Peter. Okay, so that was an individual setting. Now, we're in the group setting. So you could say, well, I have nothing to do with Peter. And it's like, yeah, I would spend some time alone. And then, let's go to now what Jesus is going to get to. Remember, now we're just hours away from all the bad stuff coming to be. The essence of verses 35 to 38 is change is coming. Change is coming. And of course, we know why. Because soon, the Master will be hanging on a cross, and then soon he will be dead, and then soon he will be put into a tomb, and then soon, guess what? They're going to be alone. I mean, really alone. When the leader's dead, you're alone. And Jesus said to them all, when I sent you out without money belt and bag and sandals, you did not lack anything, did you? And we remember that from Luke 9, and I think Luke 10, Luke 9 for sure. He sent them out, said, don't bring a wallet. Don't bring an extra pair of shoes. Don't bring an extra anything. Don't bring an extra jacket. Just go. I will take care of you. So you remember that, right? And they said, yeah, we lacked nothing, not a thing, zero, nada. So they acknowledge how he had dealt with them previously. Now everything's going to change. Verse 36. And Jesus said to them, but now, big but, big adversative, now, that is from this point on, but now, whoever has a money belt is to take it with him. Also, likewise, a bag, and the bag would be, I'd call it a knapsack. It's for your extra socks and underwear and stuff. Maybe your lunch. And whoever has no sword, sell his jacket and buy one. So, before nothing, you just take this and you go over there and you minister the gospel, and then you go over there and you minister the gospel, and people are going to take care of you. I've got it all squared away. You're good. Now he says everything's changed. When you go over there, make sure you've got your winter jacket, your sandals or your boots, enough money in your wallet to make sure you can buy groceries on the way. And if you don't have a sword, buy one. Make sure you get one. Carry one. Now you go blink, blink. Wow. Isn't our theme this morning peace? Why in the world would Jesus say carry a sword? Man. He says in verse 37, for I tell you, again, same thing, I'm talking, what I say is true, pay attention, for I tell you, that which is written must be fulfilled in me, in connection with me. So now he's addressing something in the past, written in Isaiah 53. I thought about using that as our reading open this morning. And this is a quote. And he was numbered with transgressors. So he was counted with transgressors. Who were transgressors? Transgressors are those who break the law. When you break the law, there's a penalty. If you break the law bad enough, there's a penalty bad enough to go killing. So the one prophesied in the Old Testament would be counted with transgressors. And you stop and look at the image. We only have one cross here. We could easily have three. I suppose more accurately it would be three. So we have a transgressor over here. We have a transgressor over here. Who do we have here? Well, everybody in the crowd says transgressor. Duh. Transgressor, transgressor. Nobody dies innocently on a cross. Transgressor. People looking will account that he is getting what he deserves. Even Pilate knew that was farcical. And Pilate knew it was a lie. So he is saying that was written, and it was written back there, it pertains to today. It's being fulfilled today, literally today. I mean, yes, again, it's Thursday night, but it's considered, in the Jewish way of considering, it's Friday. So today, he's going to be counted with transgressors. And he finishes up by saying, for also this concerning me has a conclusion, has an end. So, and that's where the commentators begin to go like this on what he's referring to. It's the fulfillment of that prophecy, in my estimation. It's fulfilled, it's ended here. That is to say, today. That is to say, with him hanging on the cross. So it will have its fulfillment. It must be fulfilled. It will be fulfilled. So he's telling them it's coming to an end. Now, as so often happens with the boys, we read their response in verse 38. They said, Lord, look, 2 swords here. I mean, Jesus says, it's enough. What are they talking about? Did only 2 of the 12 bring swords in? No. Was it the 2 swords on the table? Well, there were 2 swords on the table because they don't use swords for dinner. They use knives. And 1 knife would be sufficient. So no, it wasn't 2 swords on the table. Since they say 2 swords here, probably the 2 swords are on the wall in the upper room. Because this does belong to somebody else. This room does belong to somebody else. And they have 2 swords on the wall. 2 swords here. So when Jesus says, it is enough, is he saying 2 swords are enough? Because we know what's going to happen in the garden by the end of the chapter, right? There's going to be 12, or I'm sorry, there's going to be 12. 11 of them and 1 Jesus against how many? 12? I don't think 12. Thugs. I'm guessing anywhere from 50 to 100, just because thugs are thugs. 2 swords against, that's enough? Is that what Jesus is saying? 2 swords is enough. Take care of business. Or the ratio, 2 to 11, is that what we're talking about? No. The enough is this conversation is done. I fulfilled what I was supposed to tell you. If I continue, you guys are just too dull, my words. So Jesus is saying, enough. We're done. And then I don't know again where this is in the conversation, whether now he does the cup and the bread and the cup, or whether now they sing the hymn and leave. I don't know, and I don't know of anybody who knows. But here's the thing. Everything has changed. The ministry has changed. So my question was, why did Jesus say, get a sword? Well, we're not going to turn there, just due to lack of time, but if we turn to Corinthians, to 2 Corinthians chapter 11, verses 26 and 27, you would find what Paul went through in the ministry. And what did he go through? The list is long, including brigands, people who want to take your life, your money at least. So why would you bring a sword? Because when you travel, things happen. So be prepared for the problems that come. And a sword would be personal protection. It has nothing to do with a whole other religion. I mean, pretty much, I'm going to tell you, come to our religion. No? You're going to come to our religion? No? We got to wait, take care of this. That's not it at all. Jesus isn't saying take the sword and force people. He says, no, you're going to be taking the gospel, and it's going to be a dangerous situation. So make sure you practically stop and think about it. Practically, you take an extra pair of socks. Practically, you take at least a sandwich. Practically, you take something to protect yourself. So, what did we have here today, the week before Christmas? We have the end as Luke is going to, from this point, then we move into the Garden of Gethsemane. Not next week, obviously, it's Christmas, but we move into the Garden of Gethsemane, and the final Jesus with the Father, Jesus with the boys. It doesn't end well with the boys. They fail again. But Jesus is doing 2 things here. One, he's ministering to the failures that are going to happen. And he's telling them in advance that without him there's a practical way of doing ministry. And it doesn't sound very exciting, perhaps, but he lays it out. It's there for anybody to see. So I leave you with that to contemplate that this week here, we're in Passion Week. This week, in real life, Mary and Joseph are journeying to Bethlehem. So you can look in either direction, see the end from the beginning, if you choose. Father, you're good. Thank you for ministering to us. We do have a question. Who is this babe in the manger? Well, we find that he is Emmanuel, God with us. He is our peace. He's the one that brings peace. He's the one that will reign and rule. He's the one that went through a horrible last week of rejection and misunderstanding and traitorous activity to the point that put him on the cross. So, Lord, may we look at you this week. May we see you both in the manger, but may we see you also on the cross, and may we see you as the reigning, soon-to-return King. We commit our way to you in the name of the Master. Amen.